on. So thanks everybody for coming along to this session, which is obviously to do with the Flexible Fund 3 for the EDI, or the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Caucus, or EDICa, which we refer it to as well. So we may well refer to it as a caucus, EDICa, or the EDI caucus, but EDICa is the name that we give to it. We kind of like that name, and it's kind of stuck as well, and it's quite a lot of people use that term now as well. So, but apologies in advance that we may use these things interchangeably. So my name is James Richards. I'm a professor in human resource management. I'm the PI for workstream 3, which relates to Flexible Fund 3. Also on this call, we've got Katrine, who's our project manager for EDICa. I'll introduce the wider team more generally in a few moments' time. But we've also got Professor Kate Sang, who, as you may well know already, is the PI for EDICa in itself, but she's also the PI for workstream 1. There are 3 workstreams, by the way, and again, I'll say more about that in a few moments' time. And forgive me if you already know some of this information, but I suspect not everybody will do. And also we've got Professor Diane Guy from Loughborough, and Diane is a co-investigator for workstream 3. So before I get started, just want to kind of go through a range of things to do with the code of conduct. EDICa has a code of conduct. You can find out that information on the website itself, but I think it's important that as a research centre with a high profile and the intent to be inclusive and to spread good conduct and behaviour and practice, that we have our own kind of code of conduct. So this is really just about kind of saying that how we expect both ourselves and anybody who we engage with stakeholders to respect that code of conduct. I won't go into any more details because it's there before you, and you can read it and you can find out more information from the website as well. In terms of how this webinar will work, it is essentially a question and answer session. So have those questions prepared now. If you want to put them into the Q&A function, please do, or save them for later down the line. This is not the end of the matter. If something provokes your curiosity after this webinar, then feel free to contact us. Our email address is down there, or our generic EDICa email address is down there at the bottom. You can send any queries now or in the future to that address. So this session is about the application process. Give you some broad information first of all, and then we can narrow it down more further to what you may require. Having said that, you probably all should have or at least be aware of, there is a briefing document around about 6, 7, 8 pages that covers many of the things that we will go through today, but there may be 1 or 2 things in there that you might want to clarify, and other things you may want to clarify further or query further on as well. Hopefully we'll anticipate some of those things in the course of between now and the opportunity to do those to the question and answer part. Okay, so in terms of accessibility, you can activate closed captions as well by clicking on the 3 dots at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Hopefully you're familiar with Zoom, given what we've been through in the last 3 or 4 years as well. So that's something, and this video will be, when it's put online, will be captioned. And I think we may even also have a version in BSL as well. Okay, so let's move on now to, so this is effectively, like I say, this is a briefing session, a Q&A session. We're running 2 of these sessions. This is the first of 2 sessions, but the aim of the sessions is to effectively repeat this similar session in September as well. So if you're planning to attend the second session, there's no real need if you've got all your answers, if you like, from this particular session. The idea is to run effectively the same thing 1 more time at a slightly different time, and people may be further down the consideration of the application process, and they have slightly different questions and queries put to us. But just to be sure. We don't want people to turn up for 2 sessions when you only need to really, essentially, to attend one. So just some quick information here already. Again, you may already be familiar with some of the things and ways in which you can find out more information about EDICa. There's our email address. We've got a website. We're having to have a new and improved and more accessible website soon, but that's our website address at this moment in time. Plenty of information on about the Flexible Fund, and in particular, of course, Flexible Fund 3, and that information will be updated between now and, of course, when the deadline is for this particular Flexible Fund call. There's our Twitter and X account if you want to follow us on that, and we also have a LinkedIn profile as well. So what I'm going to go through today, again, many of you may well already be familiar with the Caucus in some shape or form, but today is really just to kind of make sure that everybody who is in attendance or is watching this video retrospectively will have this information at hand, and it might well be useful, make an important difference when you're considering the application, preparing it, and ultimately submitting it, of course. So we'll go through who are the Caucus. We're quite a wide range of people, and I'll tell you more about that in a few moments' time. What is the Caucus about? Because clearly, if you want to be successful and in applying for funds for Flexible Fund 3, then it's essential to know what we're about and what we're trying to do, and what you would like to do fits in with that. That needs to be kind of quite clear in some kind of way, maybe implicitly, but also potentially explicitly in parts of your application as well. What the Flexible Fund is about, some of you may already be aware of or previously applied to Flexible Funds for different kind of research projects, but we'll go through what it means in particular for EDICa, and then just go through effectively some specifics of round 3. We've already had 2 rounds. The first round projects are currently live, as far as I'm aware, projects in the process of being completed, and also for Flexible Fund round 2, we've just recently announced those people who have been successful. So we're now starting effectively the 3rd and final Flexible Fund as part of EDICa. Take you a little bit more through the application process, and then we'll finish with an opportunity for you to put any questions to us. And like I said before, we've also got Kate and Diane on hand as well, who may be answering any questions that potentially I can't answer, or they can answer better or add a little bit of information to that. Okay, so just a little bit of information about EDICa in itself. It's funded by, I think it's five research councils from UKRI, but also by the British Academy. And it was set up to support the research innovation sector in the UK with evidence-based research and equality, diversity, and inclusion practice. The term that is more broadly used, and you may have seen this information in some of the literature on the website, we use the notion of the research innovation ecosystem, which kind of suggesting that research innovation is more complex and perhaps more nuanced than just to kind of give it a term sector. There are supply chains, and there is a complexity of interaction between different kind of organizations and businesses, private and public, in that particular area. And it expands into a range of other kind of areas of life, not least things like government and other kind of policy and procedures, things like that. So EDICa is about conducting a range of things, which includes evidence reviews, original research. The Caucus itself, across its 3 work streams, is running a range of projects, research projects. Flexible Fund 3, you may have been aware that we ran a survey around about 12 months ago looking at the impact of COVID on EDI in the research and innovation ecosystem. Similar kind of projects I've been running across the other 2 work streams as well, doing original research and ultimately building. And what the flexible fund is about extending that, of course, in a very, very different way, in a way that we couldn't as individuals, but you as lots of different individuals with different ideas already kind of in mind can expand that evidence base, and we can kind of pool it all together into some kind of basis by which that stakeholders operating within the research innovation ecosystem can then draw upon in some kind of way to change the way that EDI is experienced, particularly by historically marginalised research and innovators across this sector. So some information there if you want to follow that link or quickly use the QR code if you want to kind of access that now, perhaps by a mobile device. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit about the team itself. Got 3 slides here. First of all, it's telling you who the management team is for the EDICa. Some people on here you already can aware are on the call. Myself and Kate, of course. Kate, just to kind of restate, is a PI across the Caucus, but also a PI on workstream 1. You can see that I'm workstream 3 lead. That's why I'm here today. And Robert McIntosh is workstream lead 2. We've got Jemina, who is also a deputy PI across and the EDI lead across the Caucus, and a range of other colleagues, most of which are based at Heriot-Watt University, apart from Catherine. Catherine's based at the British Geographical Society. So this is the EDICa management team. These are some people you may know already, or some people you're just becoming familiar with. In terms of our co-investigators, you've obviously got Diane here. She's mentioned in the top right-hand corner. But just to give you an idea of the wider kind of geography of where EDICa sits across the United Kingdom, I think there's probably 2 people on there who are based at Heriot-Watt. You've got Nima and Rafaela, who are based at Heriot-Watt University, but you've got Jason, who's based at Cambridge. Matters, I think she's at Kingston. Diane is at Loughborough. Marion at Glasgow. Niall, he's based at Imperial. And Will, he runs an independent and progressive research centre called Autonomy. That's something you may have heard of, and they've been quite prominent in recent times, especially to do with research related to the 4-day week. So everybody on here has some kind of association with a particular work stream, but you also have Rafaela and Nile, which look at ethics and engagement, but they cut across all the work streams. So just to kind of end with, and last but not least, we have a small team of postdoctoral researchers, most of which work across the work streams, but Siddhartha in particular, and also Joss, the postdocs who work most closely with workstream 3. So in terms of partners, these are some of the partners that we set up and are working with. National Museum of Scotland, largely based in Edinburgh, an organisation that we've relatively recently begun working really quite closely with about how we can kind of use what we've learned so far and use drawing on the wider evidence base about how we can kind of assist and change policy and practice related to EDI in such a large and prestigious organisation. We've also got the University, York University, Ontario, which is based in the Toronto area. Dr. Alison Harvey, she's a specialist in digital inclusivity, particularly related to gender. We've also got a doctoral research centre, and also EDICa, which is again a similar kind of organisation to EDICa, which is also based at Heriot-Watt University. Probably moving on to more important things, you know, the idea of what EDICa is about, what its purpose and ethos is. Again, this is probably really going to be important in terms of how you're trying to think and frame what you're planning to kind of propose to us, whether that's initially through some kind of expression of interest, but obviously, particularly when it comes to a formal submission, again, these things I'll come back to in a few moments' time, but there's also plenty of information already on the EDI Caucus website, and the briefing notes contain a lot of information. So it's important to understand, it's very much about creating an inclusive cultures in the research and innovation ecosystem. What we're looking about trying to do is trying to enable a diverse range of research and innovators to thrive and to establish and grow their careers in this kind of space. We're about changing organizations, changing institutions, changing businesses, whatever shape or form they come in related to research and innovation. This is not about changing individuals or training individuals to fit in. This is about how do we change the very institutions that we go into, the way that they work, the cultures, and the way that they're designed. This is not about changing people to fit in with that. There may well be a place for that in some way, but that's not necessarily the focus of what we're about. And we feel that there's more to be gained, more quickly to be gained by changing such kind of organization, and hence why we have workstream 3, which is about the organization of work and essentially about enabling workplaces. So EDICa is a focal point of that. It serves a range of stakeholders, and ultimately there's a strong chance that whatever comes from EDICa is likely to have some kind of longevity and perhaps broader reach, because it is a kind of the basis by which that a wide range of research councils in the United Kingdom have come together to try and set something up so that we can build some momentum in this particular area as well. So this is not just about where we are now. This is going to build into further things as well, and hopefully if you're successful in applying for Flexible Fund 3, that you'll be part of that journey as well. It's about creating evidence. I mean, that should go without saying, in a sense, that if we're going to change things, we need to do things on the basis of evidence. What is the evidence? What are we looking at? What is the problem? Do we have enough evidence to kind of build up what something different could look like, and what the outcome and what the benefits of that would look like? So we are, in a sense, creators of this evidence, but we're also kind of, as we are here today, to try and kind of extend that and to try and manage that process more broadly and draw on a much wider range of expertise and ideas to build on that evidence base. And that's where the Flexible Fund comes in, and specifically Flexible Fund 3, although the other two Flexible Funds do exactly the same thing, but slightly different areas of EDI in research and innovation. But ultimately, the key objective is to address and to try to challenge and erode these stubborn inequalities found across the research and innovation ecosystem, and then lead into creating communities of practice where these cultures can be not just created but sustained into the future. In terms of the Flexible Fund itself, in terms of the money allocated for it, in terms of what the funding costs of EDICa actually were, we were talking about £1 million over the 3 years. We're around about 18 months into EDICa, so roughly about halfway. And what we're talking about here is dividing that between 3 different calls. It's not a precise process, but roughly speaking, we're talking about £335,000 at I think that should be at 80% full economic cost, actually. Probably I should have changed that on the slide. Broadly speaking, the idea is to follow and to adhere to. So if you're already familiar with ESRC funding rules and guidelines, that might be a slight advantage, at least at this moment in time. But the idea as well of the caucus, in a sense, is to make some tweaks to that, so that encouraging people to apply. We're not only kind of trying to make research more inclusive, but also we're almost trialing in a way in which that the whole funding system could be, and probably is almost certainly moving towards at this moment in time, to be more inclusive and more considerate of groups that are traditionally and historically marginalized in this particular space. Can't stress this enough, and I'll come back to it more than once as I progress, and hopefully not too long to go now, is the notion that we believe, and the research bears this out, that one of the most effective ways in which to affect change in organizations is to have interventions that are based around core design. So that can mean many things, and we want to hear from you what you believe that means and how you can use that effectively. But all the research that's currently going on within the Caucus and all that we're commissioning through the flexible funds must be based on core design. And that could just simply be in the sense that this is if this is, it's meant to include the people who are meant to be the end benefactors. So if your research or ideas is about neurodivergent people in the innovation part of the aerospace industry, just say for the sake of argument, then it probably should and must, in a way, involve those people within that design of that process, because they are the ones that will benefit from that. It stands to reason that they unlock, or the key to unlocking what the key issues are. They are the people you'll be able to draw upon and advise you in terms of what might work best or work better than perhaps what has gone before. And ultimately, it's ethical and just general good practice. Also, we were looking for the flexible funds to be led by historically marginalized researchers. We believe that's just generally good standard practice, but that doesn't necessarily mean that more established non-marginalized researchers don't support those people who are leading as marginalized researchers. So impact is an important part of this. Not expecting any of the projects to achieve impact within the 6 to 9 months of the projects that we were hoping to commission at the beginning of 2025. But we need to see that there's evidence in the design of the research that impact is at least potentially achievable, and that impact is reasonable to expect from the project that you're doing, and is something that is sensible and reasonable to expect from a project of a relatively modest nature. But in terms of what impact means, that can mean a number of things, but probably more likely to relate to changes in how a workplace operates, or it could also be a new evidence base or a new data set that could be used ultimately for other people to draw upon, other stakeholders, and to make changes, or at least to argue for changes. And that is ultimately impact, or at least the pathway to impact. Specifics on round 3, the organisation of work, as I've kind of mentioned already, and hopefully it comes through in the brief as well. This is really about how can we change the workplaces that obviously we come from, really, but obviously there's plenty of different other and wider workplaces and workspaces in the research and innovation ecosystem that covers this. But how can we reorganize work to create enabling workspaces? It could be changing the environment, it could be about changing the culture, it could be changing policies and practice, etc. These are the kind of things we're looking to do. We're not looking to commission research that's about training individuals to fit in better, to hide the differences in an environment that is traditionally marginalized and discriminated, and just generally made difficult people's differences, and things currently are not too dissimilar at this moment in time as well. So it can reflect a number of aspects of the research and innovation workplaces, but what we're looking at things and suggestions, of course, we just have to cover all of these, but this is the territory in which we were encouraging you to consider making recommendations for minimizing inequalities in EDI and HR practice, making improvements to health and safety or even well-being policies, etc. But given this is quite unique in one sense about EDICa in terms of the flexible funds so far, we would like people to consider drawing on the notions of employment relations industrial relations, if you've been around for a while, in the sense that ways in which that relations in the workplace can be adjusted and be more inclusive, can therefore lead to more inclusive policies, practices, cultures, ways in which to deal with things in the future. So these are modest projects. They're 6 to 9 months, slightly different from previous calls. If you've been interested in previous calls on the other two flexible funds, around 6 to 9 months. And we're also looking, more than anything, I think probably the more distinct and unique your research is, probably will give it a slightly, on balance, maybe give it an edge in terms of how if it's selected or not. We're looking for a good balance across sectors in which the research proposals are set, the kind of backgrounds of the people who are involved in the research projects, but also the kind of different kind of areas of research and innovation as well. This is not just all about universities, let's say, but clearly universities are a key part of research and innovation. But there are plenty of other places where research or innovation or both are done. Not all are in the university or the HE sector, many of which happen in private enterprises, and also exist in a vast range of different types of workplaces. Quite a wide range of examples given in the brief, things such as ships or oil rigs, or even workplaces that are set out in very remote places in the world where research and innovation is done. That's just for you to think about, but the more creative and the more kind of unique, and the better that probably will be received. So I'm just going to quickly probably come to we've got one more slide generally after this. Let's quickly go through the evaluation criteria. Ultimately, how are we going to rate the proposals, hopefully, that we'll receive towards the end of October. These are critical to think about, and I'll just quickly read them off. But again, these are all contained on the brief, but some of them probably need to be asserted quite clearly and at this stage, because the sooner these things are kind of recognised, if they're not already recognised, the better it will be for you to formulate your ideas. Core design, I've mentioned that already. We've had a range of, I think we've had around about 17 or 18 people submit an expression of interest, and one thing that has stood out is that some of them are not making a clear enough reference, at the very least, to the notion of core design. So core design needs to be not just mentioned, but clearly justified and explained how that's going to be, and that will be a key part of the rating system. The evidence gap, again, these are the pretty standard stuff when we do research and apply for research grants in any kind of context, any kind of situation. But what is the gap, and can you justify that gap within, obviously, the limited confines of an application form? Impact, mentioned that already. We're not necessarily expecting to see that within the timeline of the research project itself, but the notion of impact is built into the design of the research, and there are things in place that may expand beyond the timeline of the research, where that impact will be potentially measurable, or you may go back to find out what has actually happened, how successful or not something has actually been. There's far more information in the brief on early career researchers, which is a really important part, or at least early career innovators, but we want to see them as leading the research. But again, it's important to note that it's probably advantageous in one sense to have people who are more experienced, who may be able to support that early career researcher, especially if they are characterized by a range of other kind of aspects that means that they probably would be traditionally less likely to be a accessible grant applicant for one of the UK's leading research funders. So just a couple of other things as well. Interdisciplinary and cross-sector partnerships. So this is the time to kind of chasing up all those prospective partners you may want to work with, but also reflect the variety, the rich and vast variety of different kind of research innovation workplaces. We certainly welcome research grant applications that reflect universities, don't get us wrong, but a much broader range of workplaces are within the scope of this grant application. So please consider them. And going back to the notion of a balanced portfolio, it'd be important to make sure that we've got a good and rich range of grant applications to fund, etc., things like that. EDI is not just what we try to get other people to do. We need to demonstrate it within our own kind of research teams as well. So it's important to set out what your EDI plan will be within your own research proposal and your research team. Standard stuff, which I'll finish with: value for money. Is it something that is this going to be good value for money in a range of ways? But is it something that's are you going to be able to achieve it also in one sense? Is it going to be funding something that could be done for much cheaper, or are you ultimately it could work negatively the opposite direction? You're trying to ask for money for something that is far more ambitious than the money can actually buy. So we're looking for this kind of not just value for money, but also this kind of the link between what you're spending money on, what you're hoping to achieve as well. And as kind of mentioned already, the robustness of the methodology. It's important to not just only state your methodology, but be clear about how it reflects your research aims and objectives, and how it's embedded and critical to what you aim to achieve and why you've chosen it in particular. So in terms of the application process, I'm going to kind of bring this to a close, and then we can see whether there's any questions. I can see a couple alerted, but I can't see what they are at this moment in time. As I said before, around about 17 or 18 people already, our research teams have submitted an expression of interest. We'll get feedback to them as soon as we possibly can. We're not looking to wait until the end of the period to feedback. It's only because of annual leave in the last week or so that we've not been able to do that so far. So if you have submitted an expression of interest form, we will be getting feedback in the next week, let's say, and possibly slightly later, depending on if you've submitted it relatively recently. In other words, the last few days or so. You must, in order to follow through with an application towards the end of October, you must put in an expression of interest. It's a very, very, very modest expectation. Gives us a clear idea of not just the volume, but more importantly, what people are thinking about, and we may be able to point you in the right direction of something else that might be able to help you, or offer you some guidance at this point about how you may want to steer your eventual application. It may well be the case in some instances that we see 2 or 3 that are very similar, and we may even encourage people to join forces to submit a stronger application, etc., like that. But that's not necessarily something that's going to commonly happen, let's say. But it could be a range of outcomes that could come from the process. But you must submit that in order to qualify for submitting the full application. Full details, of course, in the brief. The deadline for that is end of October, so I think that's about 9 or 10 weeks off. So quite a while to go yet, but we all know that time flies, especially when deadlines and other things get started. And most people on this call will almost certainly work for a university, and in that case, then we all get busy round about now, and if not until Christmas time. So in terms of receiving the applications, obviously there'll be some kind of sifting application. We want to make sure that everybody meets the eligibility criteria. Again, you'll find information there specifically on the website, so be sure that you meet the criteria, certainly in terms of an early career researcher or innovator who is leading the proposal. And we also have a range of reviewers. The aim is to have everything, as you would expect, double blind peer reviewed, but I'm not sure whether we might potentially be aiming to have 3 reviewers, if that's possible. It would just depend on the volume and the expertise of the people that we recruit to do our reviewing. And we aim to have that information back to people, the outcome from that, around about mid-December, and outcomes, people will be notified in January 2025, towards the end of 2025, with a view to starting as soon as possible, pretty much afterwards. Okay, so I'm not entirely sure how long I've taken to do that. I'm hoping that there's time for questions, a good amount of time for questions. But like I said before, is anything that doesn't get answered now or can't be answered now, or comes to your attention or comes to mind in the next few weeks, then please do get in touch with us directly, and you've got our email address there at the bottom. So, Kate, do you want to tell us what kind of questions have been coming in and whether there's anything that we can answer quickly or anything?
Yeah, so just for everyone's clarity, we're getting questions in the chat as well. So if people could put their questions into the Q&A, that would be great. So then other people can see them as well. So we've got a couple of questions around what qualifies as an early career researcher, and do they have to be the principal investigator?
Well, I mean, probably the more straightforward thing to say is that I don't think there is an absolute definition of ECR or ECI. We have put details of what we think qualifies as ECR or ECI in the briefing document as well. I think there are 5 points. I'll just quickly go through them, but it's probably best to consult this document another time. I've not previously been a PI, precariously employed, recent return from a career break, change of career track or return after substantial administrative responsibility, recent change in career. And I think the idea is that you must meet 2 of that criteria. Is that right, Kate?
Yeah, I think the reason we don't have a set definition is because each funder has their own definition and different. We didn't want to preclude people who maybe have had a series of precarious contracts. So I think the key thing would be when you're completing the application, just be really clear as to why you feel you meet the definition of early career innovator or researcher.
Was there another part to that question? I think.
Yeah, does the early career researcher have to be the principal investigator?
I think the answer to that is yes.
I think we prioritise those that do, because this is an opportunity for people to have funding that perhaps haven't had the opportunity to be a principal investigator before. I have put in the chat the link to the webpage that has a lot of these questions answered on it. And as James said, the briefing does answer most of the questions that we've got here. I don't want to sound too much like a lecturer saying, please read the syllabus, but the information is there for people on the website in the briefing document. And we've got another question, which is, could an early career researcher participate as a co-investigator, and will this be considered as being the lead applicant?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Could an early career researcher participate as a co-investigator, and will this be considered as them being a lead applicant?
I'm not sure if those 2 terms are synonymous.
No, so I think your principal investigator is the person with the overall responsibility for the project. Co-investigator is someone who has maybe a distinct role on the project, but they don't have the overall responsibility for it. It can be slightly confusing because in medicine they use those terms differently, the PI and the COI, or PI and COI mean slightly different things. But from ESRC's perspective, the principal investigator is the named lead applicant. The co-investigator is just out there supporting the lead investigator to ensure the work is undertaken. So if someone's a co-investigator, they wouldn't be considered a lead applicant.
Yeah. I mean, another point to kind of just generally throw in here, and this may be obvious in one sense, it's, the credentials of the full team is important here. It's not just a matter of a particular person who just happens to meet certain criteria. It still rests, of course, in terms of obviously what the fundamentals of the proposal itself, but also their expertise and where that's developing, and the support and the mentoring that could be going on in the background from more senior and far more established researchers or innovators.
Okay, we've got another question, which is it possible to have an EU partner on a project?
I think that's on the EDI FAQs, isn't it? I think the answer to that is yes, but I think I think the key issue is, correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, but the PI the PI or the institution that's going to host the grant, as long as they're eligible under UKRI rules, that's the most important thing, isn't it?
So this information is all on our website. So the website, if you scroll down at the moment, as James said, the website isn't fantastic. It's not as accessible as it could be, but it does set out the eligibility criteria. We follow the UCRI eligibility criteria. We are restricted to that. So yes, certainly you can have an overseas partner, but they wouldn't be able to be the lead applicant for a project.
Yeah, I think we got an email on that. I'm not sure it's been responded to from somebody from the US, and that question, that answer would fit that entirely, that response.
Okay, we've got a few more questions coming in. How is the research and innovation ecosystem defined in terms of the types of workplaces? Any suggestions to what organizations might be in scope or out of scope?
I don't think we could give you an absolute definitive list of what is and what isn't the research and innovation ecosystem. I mean, I think it's important to note this is probably where the expression of interest really plays an important part. If there's any uncertainty about that, that's the point at which we're likely to capture that. So it may be worthwhile to submit your expression of interest sooner rather than later, so we can give you that feedback as soon as possible, or assurance, probably more than anything else. I don't think any of us could probably rhyme off every single workplace that could be constitute that, but I think if an organization does research or innovation as a primary function of its existence, whether that's public funded, privately funded, or some kind of combination of the two, then in my mind, that would make it eligible for and come under research and innovation ecosystem. I don't know whether people want to kind of share examples of the organizations that they're thinking of and what they do. You know, not necessarily name names if you don't want to do, of course, but that might be helpful, or something they might want to do in the chat question and answer function.
Yeah, okay. So I've just been answering a few questions, just pointing people to the website where the information is. When you talk about marginalized researchers, is this assessed through the ECR, ECI criteria? So I'm not sure whether that question is asking, do we consider being an ECR a marginalized scholar, or how are we assessing? I'm not sure. So perhaps the person who asked that question could add some clarity.
Yeah.
Then we've got another question of, is open data a requirement or advantage?
I would say it's neither a mandatory requirement or an advantage. It would only be a requirement or an advantage if you felt that that was the right kind of data, or in one sense, also in another sense, but not entirely, a pragmatic and an effective way in which to get the data in order to answer your research questions, to make your recommendations for practice, and ultimately leading to sort of the prospect of some kind of impact. What I'm guessing this question may refer to is that we put something in the brief about that. You know, we would welcome applicants, and one of the primary reasons for that is that just trying to create a wider variety of interest and potential in terms of the projects that people could consider submitting, and it was something that came from the previous flexible funds, and in particular flexible fund 2, that more projects could potentially involve the use of, you know, data sets that already exist, or data that's already in existence in some shape or form, whether that be information that's drawn from website materials or other kind of social media, let's say, and things like that, that wanted to kind of be too vague or too specific. But it's really about, have you got something that's worthwhile doing? Do you have a good question? Can you demonstrate that this is an evidence gap? And if you've got the right methodology, if it just so happens to rely on open data, then and that's the right thing, or that's effective and a pragmatic choice, an effective pragmatic choice, then I think that would be advantageous.
Okay. Okay, so the original question, we've had some clarity in. How are we going to assess a marginalised? How are we going to assess whether or not a researcher is marginalised? And I was just about to type an answer and say that we have an assessment rubric on the website where you can see how the reviewers will assess marginalisation.
Okay. So that's resolved to the point where there's information there now that hopefully anybody's interest can quickly access.
Yeah.
Now, and if there's anything that stands out from that, then by all means contact us.
So we've got a question here, which is a really helpful one, and it goes back to something we were saying earlier about the differences in disciplines about what a PI is. I'm confused by PI, so that's principal investigator. I work in clinical and biomedical research and need a principal investigator to lead this in order to apply. But I'm doing the work as the co-author. That's how it works in clinical research. I'm an ECR, but the PI is not. But she would have her name as the lead. This is always the way the funding applications go here, but I'm new to research. So perhaps I just don't understand this application process properly. So what we do say on the website is if you are in that position, that your institution doesn't allow an ECR to be a principal investigator, to contact the team and we can discuss that with you individually, because that's not a UCRI requirement. That is an institutional requirement, and we'd be very happy to discuss with you. It might be possible, for example, to be co-PIs. Your institution might allow that, for example. We probably wouldn't be, I suspect, funding sort of clinical research per se. We'd be looking at research around working in that sector. But yeah, what I would suggest is, and I put the email address in the chat as well, drop us an email and we can always meet with you and discuss, see if there's a way for us to support you.
Yeah, no, that tension's come up before. There's no simple answer to that. Best to just get in touch. We'll do our best by you.
So we've got a few questions I answered, so it might be helpful for me to just quickly go through them. So one of them is whether the recruitment of PGR students is considered within scope, and I've said yes, that we look at the whole career life cycle, and that's why we've partnered with the CDT, is to support that kind of work. What do we mean by co-design? So I said that we have different we understand there are different conceptualizations. We don't have a preset view, but we'd expect applications to be clear about their chosen approach. We do also have co-design materials on the website that people can use to support their application. Is it permissible to do secondary data set analysis of existing survey data? I've said yes.
If it fits the question and the objectives, yeah.
Yeah. And do we have a target for how many researchers we want on a team? And I've said no.
No, it's a modest project though, but so we assume that it won't be about 20, but yeah, it'd probably be a small team. But what that involves for each individual will vary.
Yeah. And can professional services be principal investigators? And I've said yes, and this is set out on our website that we do support professional services to lead projects. Something else has come in. Would researchers and innovators who are self-employed be outside of the scope of the call?
What has been the focus of the call, or actually be people who are applying for the funding?
Yeah. Is it safe to assume that a focus on researchers and innovators operating in a self-employed stroke freelance capacity would be outside the scope of the call?
I'm not entirely sure whether that is. They will be effectively the basis by which research will lead to changes related to their practice, or whether they can be part of the application.
I mean, I wouldn't say they're explicitly outside, because increasingly academics, for example, are working on a freelance basis. As James said, there'd need to be a clear link to the call here, which is about the organisation of work.
Yeah, I mean, it may well be the case that certain organisations in the research innovation ecosystem depend heavily on individual contractors, self-employed people, hyper casualized workforce, let's say, but perhaps not, because that in itself probably is not a good thing to try to that's the kind of thing to probably try and change completely. So yeah, I mean, I suppose some sort of scale would be important here as well. I mean, if it's likely to, if you're going to, how much could you generalize potentially some of the research that you and the recommendations? How specialized is it? Clearly some research focus could be quite focused, and so some could be much broader. I think it's all about balance. But I suppose if an organization of 1,000 people relies on one particular one external person to do a tiny part of ultimately of the wider research innovation process, then perhaps making the focus of a research project might be not the best value for money for a particular research project. I'm generalizing here, of course. I don't want to kind of underestimate the value and relevance of such people.
And that's it. That's the end of the questions.
Okay, we'll just pause for a second to see if anybody has any last questions, because it's time is it? So we've got another 4 minutes, 5 minutes. But just to kind of restate that, other questions can be put to us via the EDICa email address beyond this particular session, and especially going back over one of the points that Kate made about institutional differences and potentially that don't necessarily fall in line with some of the information that we've provided on the Caucus website. If that's you're not quite sure how to proceed on that basis, then it's worthwhile getting in touch with us just to see whether we can support that in some kind of way, or at least offer a way through it all. But ultimately, we want to encourage the widest range of both applicants and research projects, and including that within methodologies. But we also said quite a bit about co-design, and co-design is not one thing. It can mean a range of things and different things. So a mix of different approaches is something that we're looking for as well. Okay, no more questions. Right, well, let's thanks to everybody who's attended. Hopefully you've had your questions answered, but you know where we are.